Okay, hello friends. This is Birthmark Part 2. Um, yeah, I actually have to show you a little bit of show and tell. I've got my camera propped up actually I just realized this, right in front of a really nice old collection of Hawthorne books. This is one of 10 volumes. Here, I'll show you. Yeah, right here. This is a complete collection of Hawthorne's works from 1888. And I was really lucky. I found these in a secondhand bookshop in Washington, D.C. This whole collection, gilt edges, hardly even read, for $80. So yeah, I like to, oh look, okay. Here's what Minister's Black Veil looks like. This is an early edition of this book, 1870s, I think. Anyway, so you can find some really cool old stuff out there sometimes. Yeah, good deal. Okay, so just know that this camera is sitting on the same shelf as this 10-volume collection of Hawthorne's complete works. Show and tell. That's what you get for getting to have class at home with me. Okay, well, yeah, well, we left off last time looking at, what happens when people start monkeying around with human nature, okay? And another thing is, remember that image of the rainbow that we left off with on 388, I'm sorry. And, I mean, we've seen rainbows, of course, and they're beautiful. And think about what they represent in the Bible. All of earth got flooded because of humankind's sin. And the rainbow came out at the end of all that. And it symbolized God's promise that he would never do that again. So the rainbow is an image of God's forgiveness and God's forgiveness and God's redemptive power. So if I'm perfect, I'm no longer in the need of God's redemption. So, I mean, think about everything that we're losing, Hawthorne is saying, if we actually ever do succeed in becoming perfect. We've stopped being human, and that's not good for Hawthorne. So then that leads us to the question, what about the Aylmers of the world, which again is a nasty caricature of transcendentalists. What do we do with the Aylmers of the world who think people can be made better, who can be made perfect? And I'm just going to play devil's advocate here for a second. There are ways that you can look at Aylmer and say, yeah, I mean, Aylmer is a good guy. I mean, that's all he's trying to do is make his wife perfect, right? What's wrong with that? If someone could come along and make my life better free of charge, why not? I've got plenty of flaws. I know you all out there didn't know that. I know you thought I was perfect. Well, guess what? I'm not. So why not? If someone can whip up some kind of a magic elixir and give it to me and make me perfect, sure. So, I mean, if you look over on page 382, you see that Aylmer might not be such the obvious villain. Okay, I'm about 8 lines from the top. He now knelt by his wife's side, watching her earnestly, but without alarm, for he was confident in his science and felt that he could draw a magic circle around her within which no evil might intrude. So doesn't he have good intentions here? He loves his wife and he wants to draw a magic circle around her to keep her safe. Is that bad, right? Okay, skip down a few lines. Georgiana, I even rejoice in this single imperfection, since it will be such rapture to remove it. And skip down a few more lines. Though she had some indistinct idea of the method of these optical phenomena, still the illusion was almost perfect enough to warrant the belief that her husband possessed sway over the spiritual world. So he does have some kind of power. Why not use it for good? Okay, but again, right? The road to hell was paved with good intentions. So he's trying to make her better, but yeah, look at where that's going to get you. And then, okay, look over on page 388, back to the end again, and you do see that Aylmer is actually successful. He succeeds in making his wife perfect. So he's a good guy, right? Very top of the page. The crimson hand, which at first had been strongly visible upon the marble paleness of Georgiana's cheek, now grew more faintly outlined. She remained not less pale than ever, but the birthmark, with every breath that came and went, lost somewhat of its former distinctness. Wow, it's going away. Aylmer has found a cure for original sin. Dang, okay, that's pretty cool. Where do I sign up to get some of this stuff? Well, not so fast. Skip down toward the bottom of the page. My poor Aylmer, murmured she. Poor? Nay, richest, happiest, most favored, exclaimed he. My peerless bride, it is successful. You are perfect. Wow. Starting to sound a little like a mad scientist. Eureka, right? Like Frankenstein as he brings this creature to life, right? Or Robot Chicken, the scientist in that, right? Okay, I'm going to come back to that theme of the mad scientist because it's important. All right, but file that away for a second. My poor Aylmer, she repeated with a more than human tenderness, right? Because she's becoming angelic here. You have aimed loftily. You have done nobly. At last, the crimson tint of the birthmark, that sole token of human imperfection, faded from her cheek. That the parting breath of the now perfect woman passed into the atmosphere. Okay? So if you want to be perfect, you might as well stop being human. You might as well just drop dead. It's kind of what Hawthorne here is saying. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so you're right. I mean, I do tend to agree. Aylmer is definitely a villain in this story. There's no question. But even so, we are supposed to feel some sympathy for him. He's like a tragic hero, like Macbeth or King Lear. They're stupid and foolish, and they make dumb choices, but they do the things that human beings do. It's called having a tragic flaw. But even so, this desire to aspire to something more, the desire to aspire to something more, Hawthorne understands as deeply human and deeply, deeply sympathetic. And it's something that Hawthorne himself understood. Yes, he had trouble with the transcendentalists, Thoreau, trying to perfect human conscience so we start treating people better. Yes, he did have trouble with that. He thought people like that were just silly. However, Hawthorne himself was a lot like Emerson and Thoreau and Margaret Fuller, and he knew it. He was a lot like them because he's an artist himself. And as an artist, he's trying to create something of perfect beauty himself. In this story, he's trying to, in these 10 volumes I just showed you, right? He's trying to create something of perfect beauty. Create a work of art that will be immortal somehow. So in other words, Hawthorne recognizes that he himself, as an artist, is subject to the same criticism that he's leveling at everybody else out there, all right? In other words, yes, there are the nasty transcendentalists in Aylmer, but in Aylmer is also Hawthorne, and Hawthorne knew it, okay? All right, and so you can see a sign of this over on page 385. 385. Okay, this is towards the top of the page here. It was a sad confession and continual exemplification of the shortcomings of the composite man, the spirit burdened with clay and working in matter, and of the despair that assails the higher nature at finding itself so miserably thwarted by the earthly part. And this is the key, the very last sentence here in this paragraph. Perhaps every man of genius in whatever sphere, maybe a literary genius like Hawthorne, right? Perhaps every man of genius in whatever sphere might recognize the image of his own experience in Aylmer's journal. In other words, Hawthorne sees himself in Aylmer's journal, trying to arrive at perfection, but never quite getting there. Yeah. So Hawthorne, as strange as it sounds, Hawthorne felt sympathy for Aylmer and would have us feel sympathy for him too. Tragic hero, in other words. Okay, but you know, this desire for perfection leads to madness, leads him to commit some really awful crimes. If you want to flip over to page 377. Yeah, I mean, even at the very beginning of the story, he comes across as, you know, looking an awful lot like a madman, an obsessed madman. Very bottom of 377, then over onto 378. Georgiana, said he, has it never occurred to you that the mark upon your cheek might be removed? No, indeed, said she, smiling. But perceiving the seriousness of his manner, she blushed deeply. To tell you the truth, it has been so often called a charm that I was simple enough to imagine it might be so. So watch out for someone who's trying to fix you when you think you're fine, but they're trying to criticize you into making you better, right? Someone was saying, you know, trying to make you straighten your teeth when you don't want to or something like that. Yeah, there's something creepy about this. You know, leave Georgiana alone. She doesn't need your help, so stop it. Okay, and then the husband goes on, and you know, this sinister quality, this dark underside of this desire to achieve perfection is really coming out in this next paragraph. Upon another face, perhaps it might, replied her husband, but never on yours. No, dearest Georgiana, you came so nearly perfect from the hand of nature that this slightest possible defect, which we hesitate whether to term a defect or a beauty, shocks me as being the visible mark of earthly imperfection. Yeah, okay. So trying to monkey around with stuff that you just need to leave alone, right? Don't let maybe you've heard this expression, don't let the excellent or the perfect be the enemy of the good. Georgiana is more than good the way she is. So, and Aylmer is letting the excellent be the enemy of that. Okay, yes, so let me get back to this idea that I raised a second ago, and that is, I'm gonna have to get a cup of tea to make this point. Yeah, cheers everybody. Here's to your good health, okay? It's green tea, good for you. Okay, maybe some of you recognized in Aylmer is like the archetypal evil scientist. And you'd be absolutely right to make connections between Aylmer and Dr. Frankenstein and that crazy scientist from Robot Chicken, right? All that stuff. Those people are trying to monkey around with fundamental creative powers of existence that we have no business monkeying around with. And this connects up 100% absolutely with what the Romantics were all about. The Romantics were all about, as we were saying all along, we resist what the Enlightenment is trying to say. You use science to try to make human life better, right? And so the mad scientist is kind of a gross characterization of the ethos of the Enlightenment. You know, the Romantics were saying, no, enough of you science. You guys need to sit down and be quiet. You've done enough damage. You're putting us into these factories. You're turning us into robots. So stop it. So you'd be right to make connections between Aylmer as a mad scientist and that evil governmental machine that Thoreau was talking about. Even though they're both very different, one's a transcendentalist and one's a dark romantic, they both have a common enemy up here in the Enlightenment. Science is kind of bad, okay? So Aylmer as the mad scientist. And there are many, many, many other examples of that all through pop culture and art and literature and on and on and on. Just know that that character type has its roots in Romanticism. Okay. I hope people still read that novel, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. That's another classic example of that. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, of course, came out in the early 1800s, and it is a work of Romanticism. Okay. All right. Well, just as a way of wrapping up here, and that is that we do need to think a little bit about what Hawthorne might be saying about men's treatment of women. Yes, science is being directed towards women to try to make them more perfect. And science then is a kind of patriarchal institution. And think about it even to this day, this mad rush to plastic surgery. And yes, men get plastic surgery. Think Tom Cruise or, John Travolta. You can look at before and after shots and you can see it. They've had a lot of work done. But if you do the statistics, who are the ones that are getting the most plastic surgery, men or women? And I think you already know the answer to that. It's women that have felt more pressure to correct in quotes, correct the way that they look. So you can say that Hawthorne deserves credit for calling out men's bad treatment of women. How often do we hear about, someone being married to a wife and the wife isn't good enough. He keeps criticizing her. You've got to lose weight, or why can't you be more sexy? Why can't you look like Kim Kardashian on TV or whatever? Well, guess what? Kim Kardashian's had a lot of work too. A lot of plastic surgery, right? So, you can make the case that Hawthorne is calling out men's poor treatment of women. That's one thing I do like about Hawthorne. I think that's really true, that he does do that. And you can see this. Aylmer is a nasty, mad scientist, but he's also kind of misogynistic. And he's being abusive. He's being a male abuser towards a woman. Being overly controlling toward a woman. And this comes out here. Look over on page 380. Okay, we saw at the beginning of the story, Georgiana thought the birthmark was fine, and she knew that it was sort of like a beauty mark that, made her attractive to a lot of people. Now, with Aylmer's constant bullying, watch the way her attitude towards her own birthmark has changed. Aylmer, resumed Georgiana solemnly, I know not what may be the cost to both of us to rid me of this fatal birthmark. Perhaps its removal may cause cureless deformity. Or it may be the stain goes as deep as life itself. Again, do we know that there is a possibility on any terms of unclasping the firm gripe of this little hand which was laid upon me before I came into the world? Yeah, getting all choked up over this. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, she's been so bullied that she's internalized his own evil, crazy monomania. And so he's internalized her virtues and turned that into some self-hate. And for Hawthorne, that's bad. That's bad. Aylmer's a bad man and he's being abusive. Okay, and then if you look over on page 386, a little bit more of that, the extent to which Aylmer has become abusive in his quest for perfection. Okay, 386, I'm about 10 lines down. Okay, he rushed towards her and seized her arm with a gripe that left the print of his fingers upon it. I don't know, try to do this. Do this with your arm here. Grab it really tightly like this, right? See how tight you have to grab your own arm before it leaves a mark. There we go, okay. You seeing a parallel here? Okay. If this handprint on her cheek was the handprint of the devil, if you will, and the mark of earthly imperfection on Georgiana, and then in Aylmer's quest to remove that birthmark from her cheek, which is a handprint, you see what I'm getting at? He's leaving his own handprint, right? Okay. Aylmer has become the devil. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Trying to achieve perfection, Aylmer has become every bit as demonic as the serpent in the Garden of Eden that is responsible for that original sin. Okay, that's how bad all that is for Hawthorne. Okay, so Aylmer's own hand, okay, this hand that works such genius, has the power of genius, also has the capacity to bring out incredible evil. And that handprint on Georgiana, I think, brings that out. Okay, and then skipping down a paragraph, same page, 386. I submit. Don't submit to a devil, Georgiana, that's where you made a mistake. I submit, replied she calmly, and Aylmer, I shall quaff whatever draught you bring me, but it will be on the same principle that would induce me to take a dose of poison if offered by your hand. Okay? So she has given up. She has become submissive to Aylmer's evil. She's internalized this value. And for Hawthorne, that's a terrible tragedy when a monster like Aylmer is able to drive a beautiful, innocent, almost completely innocent woman, driving her to such despair. That's evil for Hawthorne. Okay, well, I wish I could leave you on a cheerier note than that. If there's a message in all this in the era of coronavirus, even your best friends, okay, social distancing, stay away from that hand, okay? Don't shake any hands for right now, okay? And if you do, wash them, okay? Wash those hands so you don't end up being a transmitter of evil. Okay, that's how I make that connection, as poor a connection as that might be. Okay, well, take care, friends. I mean that sincerely. I want you to be healthy and well, and we'll continue to learn this good stuff in our own homes here, all right? Okay, take care.